Day 8 of Lions training camp features some highly competitive moments and a few tempers flaring, but we're going to talk about all of that and more right now. What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome into the Pride of Detroit training camp observation. I'm Miko, and in today's video, we're going to go over day 8 of Lions training camp. Now, yesterday we didn't have an observation because it was mostly a walkthrough for the Lions on that day. So today we finally got the Lions back at practice, back in full pads, and it was a very, very competitive day. And we're going to talk about all of the biggest news, observations, and takeaways that came out of today's practice. Now, first thing I want to start off with, though, before we jump into practice, is today was the first day that we got to see Aaron Glenn meet with the media before training camp practice. Now, for some of you who may not know, Aaron Glenn is probably one of my favorite coaches on the staff. And so I'm always pretty locked in whenever he meets with the media. And Aaron Glenn did not disappoint. One of the biggest nuggets that kind of came out, and it's something that I would even say that I've been guilty of, or this channel has been guilty of over the first few days of training camp, is definitely putting a focus on where guys are playing and what guys are getting reps with those first team, second team, and third team. And Aaron Glenn quickly wanted to dismantle that thought process, basically highlighting the fact that, like, listen, we like to play guys in different situations to see who can basically sink and swim, right? What guys can kind of match up and what guys are maybe a little too over their head in certain situations. Now, this is a really important tidbit to take away from AG as he's meeting with the media because, again, there's a lot of things that are happening with training camp, and a lot of us are focused on very specific players and trying to get a vibe on like who is actually has a chance of contributing and what guys probably don't. Now, with that said, I do truly believe that, like what AG is saying, that maybe we're putting a little too much stock in this person being with the first team and this person being with the second team or whatever the case may be. But with the same on the same token, though, you can't help but feel like in some sort of fashion that it is a little bit of tipping of the hand of what guys they expect to contribute, especially in certain situations. So while it is probably way too early to necessarily pencil in Brian Branch or Broderick Martin or even Jack Campbell in with the first team, I do think it gives us a really good indication of the fact that those guys will be heavy contributors. And again, Aaron Glenn kind of said as much. Listen, they drafted these guys because they expect them to contribute, or at least sees the opportunity to contribute. And with Branch, Campbell, and Martin, those three guys as rookies will definitely have those opportunities. He also had some really good things to say about Levi, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in this video. So definitely stay tuned for that. Now, one of the biggest storylines to come out of today's practice and has literally been everywhere is how Jameson Williams performs in today's practice. Now, depending on who you've read or where you've gotten your information, you've probably either heard that Jameson had a really bad day, or again, you probably heard that he had a bit of a mixed bag day. From my interpretation, I would say it's more of the latter. Jamo's day was very much of a mixed bag. Didn't start out very well in one-on-ones in a lot of these individual drills where he was consistently dropping passes and even got into a fight with Starling Thomas, which on the surface isn't probably something that you want to see from your former first round pick. But at the same time, if you kind of take a step back from it for a moment, you can kind of understand why this is probably a rougher day for Jamo, simply for the fact that one, he's coming off of having that injury that he sustained last week, only having the jog through yesterday under his belt, and now going completely full speed today in pads. And we also have to remember that this is his first training camp with pads on. So there is a bit of an adjustment. As for the fight or whatever altercation he was having with Starling Thomas, personally, this is something that I actually like to see out of my players. You want to see guys being fiery, you want to see them being competitive. And when Jamo met with the media afterwards, he kind of downplayed it as just that it's just football. It's just guys competing and having that competitive fire. And whether it's a sign that Starling Thomas has his number or if it's just a sign of an area that Jamo needs to get better in, either way, it's something that the fan base that I think should take in a positive light. When Jamo returns in week 7 and he starts lining up against these other NFL corners, they're not going to take it easy on him. And he's going to have to be able to fight through that adversity. It's better that he starts fighting through that adversity now versus having to face it for the first time and not know what to expect once he gets into the regular season. So that was a little bit of the bad. The little bit of the good that came out later in the practice, one of them being an amazing block that's already kind of making the rounds over on social media that the Lions have put out, where Jahmyr Gibbs was taking a pretty long run and Jamo offering an amazing block. And basically, when asked about it, he had basically my favorite quote of the day, which is Ben Johnson telling him, "No block, no rock." And so for Jamo to already like adopt that mentality and to know that that is a really big part of what Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson ask of their wide receivers, and he's willing to commit to that. He's not just going to be the type of guy that just wants to, get passes thrown his way and not wanting to do the dirty work is an amazing sign for this football team. It shows that he's bought in at least and willing to do the dirty work and not just be, the deep threat that a lot of us know that he can be. He also had some really good battles with CJ GJ in a number of different red zone situations where again, he got the better of CJ, and CJ is one of the better defensive players that we've been talking about on this channel and that Lions fans have been excited about for a while. So the fact that Jamo is even getting the best of him, getting clean releases off, and showing that ability that, like, hey, he can get open against top tier talent as well is a good sign. Now, the drops, yes, that's going to have to get cleaned up, but it's something that I'm personally not overly concerned about because, again, some of this could just be nerves, some of it just could be concentration, and it's something that gets worked out with repetition. I absolutely understand people who are concerned, who want to see JMO, basically bring down every catch. But in a way, it's still somewhat of like his rookie year or somewhat of his, like, we have to somewhat treat this like his rookie training camp in that sense. And so, yes, it's going to have its ups, it's going to have its downs. Before JMO got injured and, missed most of last week of training camp, he was already, making strides and showing that he had a better connection and was having less of those issues. Now that we're going into this first week of him having on pads, yes, there might be a little bit of that, but let's look forward to seeing if he adjusts and seeing if he gets better as the week goes on. Now, one player that we are not having to wait on and waiting to see if he's adjusting or getting, better as the practice goes on is CJ GJ. Since returning back from his injury, he is basically stepping right back into the role that he had before he had suffered that injury. He's being loud, he's being a leader, and he's basically being the guy that the Lions probably were hoping they were getting when they signed him. He's that guy that's willing to lead by example and put it all out there on the field. We talked about again him having those tough matchups with Jamo, but he also had an amazing play where he basically read and diagnosed a pass route happening and basically was able to hit Jahmyr Gibbs, break up the pass, and it was really one of those welcome to the NFL type of moments for Jahmyr. I've been of the mindset since the Lions signed CJ GJ that he is the guy that they need to really lead this defense, to be that energy, to be that battery in the back of the defense to help them take it to another level. And him making plays like this, him being loud, him being vocal, him holding guys accountable is definitely going to be the thing that I think, if nothing else, helps the secondary play at a higher level. But again, energy is contagious, as he would say. He's like the flu. And if it can start to permeate throughout the rest of this defense, it really makes you feel really good about them. Maybe not being a top 10 defense, but definitely being a top 20, top 15 type of defense if they're able to buy in and execute the system that Aaron Glenn has put in place. Now, one more note on the defense, and I talked about this earlier in the video when talking about Aaron Glenn, is that Aaron Glenn did have some really nice things to say about Levi Onwuzurike. Now, Levi is a guy that we talked about probably in the first training camp observation, just for the simple fact that he was actually practicing and didn't end up on the pup list. And since then, it's been a little quiet on the Levi front, and it's mostly because they've been taking it slow with him. But when AG was asked about Levi, he really took a moment to not just talk about Levi the player, but talk about Levi in the context of just a person coming back from injury and how much that inspires and speaks to Aaron Glenn about Levi's commitment to the team. He specifically took out time to point out a play where Levi actually got bent backwards a little bit, and it actually kind of scared him a bit. But the fact that Levi was able to have that play happen, bounce back up, and get right back in the huddle for the very next play showed to Aaron Glenn that, you know what, this guy isn't affected. He's getting to a place mentally where he can just go out there and just play football. And in today, Levi had another really good moment where, again, having a play where he was able to, stuff a run and kind of just show that maybe he's on the track to getting healthier and that he's on the track of being able to find a role on this defense for himself where he can actually contribute. Again, he's not necessarily setting the world on fire by any means, but like we continue to talk about on this channel, it's all about stacking days. It's all about showing progression throughout training camp. And if Levi can continue doing that, it definitely makes you feel good about him at least being able to make this roster, even if it's just as a rotational defensive tackle. Now, I just spent a lot of time talking about the defense, and because For the most part, it was a really good day for the defense. But the offense did have their moments as well, specifically in the running game. We haven't had a lot to say about the running game, and it's mostly because the defense has been so stout up front. And so there's been not a lot of opportunities for the running backs to have these big plays. But like I mentioned with Jamo having that amazing block earlier, Jameer Gibbs did have some really good runs, showing a lot of patience at the line, being able to definitely showcase that he can do more than just be a wide receiver, which again, he's going to be used in that role. We always talk about, or we've continued to talk about the fact that he's probably going to be used a lot like Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey, but still showing that Jameer Gibbs can be a factor in the run game and specifically inside and outside is going to do nothing but help make this offense even more versatile and even more difficult to predict. As for David Montgomery is kind of like the model of consistency. And he's kind of really reminding me a lot of Jamal Williams in that regard, where you can at least count on David Montgomery to get you those 5+ yards per carry. He just is efficient in that manner. And if that is able to continue throughout training camp and definitely translate over to the regular season, it makes you feel good about the Lions' ability to replicate the type of success that they had with their running game last season. And in terms of who might be in the lead for the RB3 spot, again, I think that battle's really going to come down to Justin Jackson and Craig Reynolds, which I still kind of give an edge to Craig Reynolds, but the Lions really love Justin Jackson. So much so that even when they brought him back, Dan Campbell even kind of said, like, you have to keep him in that conversation for RB3. So if the Lions are looking to keep only 3 running backs, it might be Justin Jackson. If they're looking to keep 4, I think you can soundly say right now that it's going to probably be Justin Jackson and Craig Reynolds, just because the Lions know what they have in those guys and they trust those guys to be able to fill a role and execute their jobs perfectly. So, guys, that's going to do it for the day 8 training camp observation over here at Pride of Detroit. If you have any more questions or if you're looking for any more information on training camp, head over to prideofdetroit.com where you can read Eric's latest article about all of the other things that transpired during training camp. You can also check out the link in the description where you can head over and listen to the podcast that Eric and Jeremy did, where they go into much more detail about some of the things that stood out to them. And you can get their instant reaction as they record that podcast right after training camp practice. Hope you guys enjoyed all of this information. If you did, leave a comment below. Also, be sure to like this video. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. All of those things really help out the channel. But with that said, I'm Miko here at Pride Detroit, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.